Hi, I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching accesstv.org.
And welcome back to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. Today I have a wonderful storyteller for you, a wonderful guest. I told you about her last week. I told you I would have a wonderful storyteller for you this week. And I certainly do, and she's here now. And we're going to talk to her for a little bit. And her name is Liz Gruber. How you doing, Liz?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I know I said Gerber because I've been saying Gerber for years, and then I put you on the email, and I couldn't get it up because I spelled your name wrong. And then I said it's Gruber. It's Gruber. So if I say Gerber, you know it's Gruber. It's just my habit of saying the wrong name, but I
get that a lot with the baby food.
And that's what I think about the baby food. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I have not seen you for years. This is the first time I've seen you for a long time.
Yeah, since you had the old bookstore.
That's right, since I had the old bookstore, and you gave me some very good advice. I'll remind you about that after the show. But right now, just tell us a little bit about you, and you're going to tell us a few stories, right?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I've been telling stories. I lose track of how long I've been telling stories. I feel as though it's forever and since yesterday. But I got a master's in oral traditions a few years ago, which gave me a whole different insight into storytelling. And you just ask me, I'm there. You put people in front of me, I tell a story. I love telling stories. And I now do scheduling and send out notices for a story sharing group that I'm in. That is a wonderful group because you get to try out stories and get a little bit of feedback, not too much. It's not a workshop, but if you go to these story sharing groups, you get an idea what works, what doesn't, and it's with a friendly group, so you're not going to be criticized too much. That didn't work too much. So I've been telling stories in schools and festivals and community centers, libraries, all sorts of places. Little community gatherings in my neighborhood, all kinds of things. And I love to tell stories to adults. I think it's such a sad thing that people think that storytelling is just for children.
Yeah, I get that too, but I get a bigger response from adults than I do from children.
Yeah.
And I'm the same. I love telling stories to adults. I love telling stories to children. But when I say I'm going to have a storytelling event, the first thing that the adult says, "Oh, I'll bring my children."
Right.
And I said, "No, this is for you."
Yeah.
So I get that too.
Oh, I know. I don't know what happened. I think in Europe that has not happened so much. There's more storytelling for adults in Europe than there is here. Somehow here it got turned into a child activity.
And if you read the storytelling, the history of storytelling, and read some of those fairy tales, you said that this couldn't have possibly been written for a child. This really had to be written for an adult. Yeah, we turned it into, but they didn't do that in Europe. I didn't know that.
No, not as much. Well, you think about it, they used to gather in the villages And the storyteller would start with stories that were appropriate for young children. And they'd sit there the whole evening. So the young children would fall asleep, and the stories would get a little bit more difficult, a little bit longer, and then the older children would fall asleep, and then the storyteller's stories would get a little bit more sophisticated, and a little bit longer too, a little bit more complex. So the stories went along with the audience until it was just adults, and the stories were just for the adults in the audience. And that's really what was going on for centuries.
I didn't think of that layer.
Yeah,
I didn't think
I
of that.
came
Yes.
across it. I forget where I came across it, and I said, "Oh, that makes so much sense."
Yes, it does.
Yeah, yeah. So it's definitely for everybody.
Yes, yes. You know, if we stay out there long enough, everybody will know that if we just keep pushing. Just keep pushing. But I don't find it difficult to get adults to a storytelling. You know, they come.
Do they?
Oh, yes, they come.
That's great. When they know it's just for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
They
Oh,
do
that's
that.
great. Well, you've cultivated a group too that know you, maybe.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
And I had my first call this week that said, "Thank you for my show, and I enjoy you very much." So I was so pleased. I said, "Oh, someone's listening."
Oh, that's
yes.
wonderful.
So that was that was good.
Doesn't that feel good?
That feels
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to start your stories now?
Sure.
Okay, now we're going to hear Liz Gruber
Yeah.
telling us a story.
Yes. I got interested in Afghanistan in that area when the war began, and I realized we don't know those people over there. So I was looking around for stories, and I found this one that's not from Afghanistan, it's from Kazakhstan, which is right next door. I thought it was an interesting story. There were two old men. They had lived long enough that they were each other's only and best friends. One was a farmer and grew all the vegetables that they ate, and the other was a shepherd and took care of their sheep. And they lived this way for years, but they had to be careful. The shepherd would take the sheep up into the mountains to graze, where the best grazing was, but that was also where snowstorms came. And they had to be careful because of the snow and the ice. One year, a sudden snowstorm came up, and the shepherd could not get his sheep down from the mountain in time, and they all were lost, frozen in the storm. So the shepherd went to his friend the farmer to say goodbye. He had no way to live anymore, and he had failed at his livelihood. So he intended to go back up into the mountains to die. But the farmer said, "No, no, you are my only, my best friend. You cannot leave me. I will give you half my land. I will teach you to farm. We will work together." And the shepherd was persuaded to stay. So when spring came, the shepherd, who had become a farmer, went out to his field to prepare the land. And as he dug his shovel into the ground, he hit something. It wasn't a rock. He thought, "Wow." And he dug again. What is this? And he dug all around it, and it was a box. And he pulled the box out of the ground and opened it, and it was filled with gold. And he ran to his friend, the farmer. "You are a wealthy man. You are such a wealthy man. I found gold in your land." But the farmer said, "No, I gave that land to you. You are wealthy. That gold is yours." And the shepherd said, "No, no, that land was in your family for generations. The gold is yours, I'm sure." And they argued back and forth and back and forth, and they could not settle their dispute. Finally, they remembered that in the village, a couple of days away, there was a teacher who was reputed to be very wise. And they would take their dispute to him. So they picked up the box, each one taking a handle, and they walked the days into the village, and they went to the teacher and told him their problem. And the teacher looked from one to the other. He thought. He said, what you must do is take the gold to the city, to the market. Use the gold to buy the very best seeds. Come back, plant an orchard for yourselves and the village. We need an orchard. And the old men thought that was a good plan. And so they each took a handle on the box and they walked more days into the city. And oh, the market was amazing. They had never seen such wonderful things. Silks and tea from China, silver from India, carpets from all over. But when they found the area where the seeds were sold, they were not very good. And they decided to stay the night and look again the next day. But then there was a commotion over in another part of the market, and they looked. There was a wealthy merchant. They could tell he was wealthy, the way he was dressed, leading a caravan of camels into the market. And on each camel there were cages, and in the cages there were birds. Oh, they were beautiful birds. Glowing reds, iridescent greens and blues, and none of them sang. And the old men went up to the merchant. They said, what will you do with these birds? And the merchant said, oh, rich men buy these birds. Oh, what do they do? Oh, they keep them for decoration, and then when they get tired of them, they kill them and eat them. Use their feathers to put in their hats or clothing. And the old men looked at one another. These birds should not be killed or eaten. How much would it cost to buy the birds? And the merchant looked at these men with their rough, dirty clothes and their work boots and their hands calloused from years of work, more than you will ever see. And the old man reached down and opened the box of gold. Is this enough? And the merchant said, ah, they're yours. And he was still running his hands through the gold pieces when the old man reached and opened all the cages and let the birds out. And the birds flew up into the sky and around, and oh, they sang. And their song was so beautiful. Everyone in the market stopped what they were doing and looked up to listen. And those who were there that day remembered that song to the end of their days. And then the birds flew away. And the old men set out for home, elated because they had saved the birds, but still very sad because they had failed in their mission. But they arrived home after a few days' travel, and they went into their fields to begin work, and in their fields there were the birds, and each bird scratched in the dirt and dropped a seed, and then used their wings to cover up the seed, and then they flew away, leaving the seeds in the care of the old men. They were not magic seeds, and so it took years for the trees to grow, and more years for the trees to bear fruit. And the old men did not live to see their trees bear fruit. But oh, they did. And in time they had apricots, apples, pears. And the old men are remembered by the children who play under the branches of the trees, the lovers who stroll hand in hand among the trees, and the old people who lean against their trunks and rest at the end of the day. And it is called the Friendship Orchard. That's the story.
Very, very good. That's a wonderful story because in life,
Mm-hmm.
I saw when I was listening to the story, when you have made a decision and you didn't get what you wanted, sometimes you do the right thing for the right reasons and you don't really know that and you think you've failed, but there's always something else at work. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
My nephew yesterday said that same thing to me. He was coming to get his wife from the hospital, and he said, I was at my end's. I tried to do everything I could, and everything turned out just right. And you're telling me this story, and he said how much his faith had grown. Because it wasn't him. He couldn't do it, but it happened anyway.
Yeah.
So that story was wonderful.
Yeah.
And it is life. It is life.
Right.
It is truly life.
I also thought it was really interesting that neither one of the men nor the teacher, the three of them, never thought of sharing the gold. The old men, they each wanted the other to have all of it.
I thought of that. I thought of that too.
Wow.
No selfishness. Why is there no selfishness in this
Right,
story?
right.
Because usually that builds a story, the selfishness.
Yeah.
And there was no selfishness, no greed, no.
Not at all.
And except for that, the rich man, and he just sold his birds. I mean,
Yeah.
there was not any real devious things to get the gold and do all of these things that we always see.
Yeah. And it's so strange.
Is that real? Is that life? Is there somewhere where we could actually see that? Is that happening now?
I think so. I think
It's
so.
got to be some. You don't see it every day. You don't see it. Period. I don't see it. So it's wonderful to hear a story like that and say, "Oh, please let that be happening somewhere." Somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I would think a lot of people would think that the shepherd that found the gold would think he was very generous if he shared it.
Yes.
He said, "Oh, I'll give half of it to my friend," and yet no, he wants all of it. And the other thing that really interested me about the story was that these were old men, and the implication is the teacher is a young man. And how unusual is that?
For the old
Man
man
to go to a young man for advice. So that was
Yes.
a couple of things, plus that it just worked out, that really attracted me to that story.
Oh, those are the kind of people I want to be around all the time. All the time. All the time.
So that gives you another whole glimpse into the
Yes.
culture of that part of the world, that story came from that place.
That place.
Yeah.
And what country?
Kazakhstan.
Say that again?
Kazakhstan. It's right next to Afghanistan. Yeah, there's a lot of Stan countries.
And
That's
in
one
that
of
part
them.
of the world where there's so much turmoil, a story like that came out of that.
Right, it's a very traditional old story.
So we don't know. We think everyone's like us, but everyone's not like us.
No,
The
and
world-
yet, in another way they are.
yes.
They need each other as friends, and they know that. They know they need each other. So
They know that. Is that the difference?
Yeah,
They
maybe.
know they need each other.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a lot of
But
it.
right now we're going to stop right now and take a little break, and I'll be right back with you. See you in a moment.
Hi, and welcome to AccessTV.org. I'm your host from Shaping the Next Generation, Naima Jackson. Welcome to AccessTV.org. We're your hosts, Naima Jackson.
And I'm Elijah Williams.
Thank you for tuning in to Shaping the Next Generation. Today's special guest is Ms. Vicki Gallen-Clark.
Ms. Vicki will stop by on the show to talk about her role in the Blue Hills Civic.
Now, if you haven't heard about Blue Hills Civic Association, you should definitely look into it. It's located on Asylum. Now, if you don't know anything about Blue Hills, you should know that Blue Hills Civic Association, they will definitely help you get a step forward in your future. they'll help you figure out what you want to be in the future, because they definitely helped me. I figured out what I want my career to be, I figured out what college I want to go to, and I figured out what I want to major in. Blue Hills helped me because they helped me learn how to write a resume, a cover letter. They prepared me for an interview to get a job. Blue Hills Civic Association is definitely the perfect program for our youth today. Now, thank you for joining us on accesstv.org. I like accesstv.org because they offer us highlights on our local community that you don't get from Channel 3 or Fox News. They also gave us highlights from sports like track and field. So thank you so much for joining us. And all the youth out there, you should definitely join us at Access TV and definitely check out Blue Hills Civic Association, because it will help you, it will motivate you to get out there, look into our programs, and it will help you shape your future.
Welcome back. Wasn't that wonderful? Wasn't that a wonderful story? Yes, we're going to have Liz back again. And we'll, at the end of my storytelling, then we'll talk to her. Maybe we'll have time to say a few more words to her. Today I brought a newly published book from one of our own, and it's called Hard Climb Up the Ladder. And this is Chief Stewart. And you know Chief Stewart around town. You see him this place and that. I see him at a lot of meetings. And he is the first black fire chief in New England. And he's a wonderful man. Wonderful, gentle man. And I'm going to read you a poem that was written for Chief Stewart. Of course, everybody still calls him Chief. And he'll be giving some book signings around town and in different organizations, so look out for them. I don't know where they were. Probably in the local newspapers you'll find where they'll be. He hasn't scheduled one yet for Cull Books, but I'm sure that he will be. His books are at Cull Books, so if you want one, please drop me a line or come by 677 Blue Hills Avenue in Hartford and pick up one of these books. So I'm just going to read you a little bit about, there was a tribute given to the chief in about 1966, I think. And it says, a tribute to a black firefighter. I heard the engines clanging clongs a block or two away, and then I saw the raging fire, dark smoke and water spray. I saw the shiny ladder as it reached up to the wall, and then I saw him climbing upward toward the call. His black hands gripped the ladder, which he climbed with sured pace. The smoke engulfed his body, flames danced about his face. I can't hold on, please help me. A youthful voice, a pleading cry. Hold on, I'm coming, was his firm, assured reply. The roof began to crumble. The building's end was near. Those below began to scatter at the sound which filled their ears. His dark face was gripped with horror. His mind was seized by fear. As he reached the fiery window, he heard, "Swing the ladder clear." In the next heroic moment, as I closed my eyes to pray, a black hand gripped the child and lifted him away. There atop the ladder, clearly seen by every age, were firemen and child, dark silhouettes against the sky. He was grimy, hot, and haggard as he stepped down to the ground. A cheer arose. He smiled, but he never turned around. When a reporter asked his name, I heard him quietly say, "No name, please." Compared to bigotry and other barriers I've overcome, this was an easy day. This is by James Overton Rogers, written and dedicated to John B. Stewart Jr. on the occasion of his promotion to lieutenant in March 1966. Later, it was rededicated to honor all black firefighters. So, I love that poem. I thought it was, I could see the pictures were in my head.
Yeah, me too.
Now, Chief Stewart was first in a lot of things in Hartford. Lived a life of first, it says. He was the first African American to operate a lathe machine. I know what it is. I don't know if I'm saying it right. At the Hartford Machine Screw Company, one of the first 2 black cashiers in the New England A&P supermarket chain, one of the first 3 black drivers in Hartford yellow cab fleet, the first African American to become an officer in the Hartford Fire Department, and the first black chief in New England's history. So he was a first in so many things, and he's still with us. He is still with us. So this history is still with us. He still can tell us about Hartford. And the wonderful thing about this book is that when you open it and you start to read it, you say, oh, I know that place. Oh, I know that. Did that really happen? Like he said in one part of the book that there was a time when blacks could not go into the YMCA in Hartford. So a group of black men bought some land in Glastonbury, and our children went to camp anyway. They went up to Glastonbury. I don't know if that's still open or not, but my brother seems to, if this is aging me, my brother seems to remember that camp. I don't remember it, but my brother seems to remember it. And there's a lot of things about Hartford that the chief went through, came through, and if were not for him and people like him, we would not have the things we have today. That's why it is so important to know your history, because if you don't know it, you just might repeat it. And there was, I'm going to give you the name also, Chief puts in here, of the first black firefighter. I think I need to name him. And his name was William Henry Jacklin. Was the first black to join the Hartford Fire Department. He was hired in 1898 and a substitute firefighter. In 1908, he was told he could become full-time, but would not be allowed to sleep in the same quarters with white firefighters. A proud man, Jacklin refused, but remained a volunteer. He was reported to have distinguished himself as a firefighter during the Great Hartford Railroad Station fire of February 1914. And that was another surprise to me, that they had 2 separate quarters. Not a surprise. It would not have been a surprise to me if we were down south, but it was indeed a surprise to me that also was in Hartford, Connecticut, my home. Yes, when I grew up, yes, I felt racism. There were places sometimes when I went into restaurants that I wasn't seated. When my aunt took me there, I could remember we were not seated at Howard Johnson's one time, right down there in the Meadows. Remember the Howard Johnson's in the Meadows? Mm-hmm. And they just let us stand there until my aunt said, come on, Cleo, let's go. So we have to look at these things because it's not all going away. We still have institutional racism. The chief fought this for years and overcame so much, and maybe it has a little different face now that we need to look. So it's very important to read your history and to look around and read everything, not just one thing. Just read everything. If you just read your history, you might get a little upset. You know, you have to read everything because it's not to make you angry or so mad, but it's make you see that we must continue on. And this is J.A. Rogers, Your History. I know I've shown it to you before. It's not a new book, but it's always on my shelves. And this is our history. And maybe it's easier to read sometimes a book like this and I really do think that if you read some of these and you need to do a report, it's a quick read to do a quick report. There's enough information in there. So think about getting your children this. Just to keep it on the shelves. I hope all of you have like a little library or a little place where you keep all your books and be safe, that they're safe and well taken care of. And this one I wanted, Rent Party Jazz. There was a time when we had each other's backs, and if a neighbor could not pay their rent, we had a party. And we paid to go into the party. We danced, we sang, we jazz. We played our jazz, and that party got their rent money. And we all went home happy. And they got to stay in their apartment. So when children look at this, I don't really sell too many of these books, but that could be explained to children and to young people how we used to take care of each other and have each other's backs. And there's a lot of things that we used to do together that we no longer do, that we might need to get back to, maybe in a different way. But we still need to have each other's backs and to grow. So, Rent Party Jazz. And there's a lot of books up at Cub Books that I'm sure you'd love to read. Come up for storytelling, child or adult or young person, and let's talk about whatever you want to talk about. I'm always there. There's a nice, comfortable place to sit down. We can have a nice conversation. You can have some tea, or you can have something cold to drink, and I'll be there to talk with you with other people. So come up and visit us. And right now, I have to say goodbye. I am so glad you came and told your wonderful story.
Thank you. Me too.
We love it. And of course, you're going to come back, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to come back and join us. And it's going to be different every time. I'm trying. I know you have to look at my face every week, but we're going to try to make it different and more exciting. But for right now, I got to say goodbye. And you remember, read a little, write a little, and imagine. I'll see you next week.